Welcome to user persistence. In this video, I really want to cover what persistence is and why it's important, and then the big difference between user persistence and system persistence. Now, we use the term persistence a lot in the red team industry, and it's basically indicating, is your malware persistent in that it's going to start on every machine reboot, or if the computer logs off, let's say the user logs back on, is your malware going to call back again? Or are they gonna have to reopen your phishing email, re-go through all that stuff? As a red team operator, you wanna make sure you install or make some configuration change to get persistence working as soon as possible. Again, if they reboot their computer, you don't wanna lose that callback. And I wanna illustrate this on our Windows attack machine. So let's come over to Rogue Arena here. We'll open up our Windows attack box here. And then I have a really good example here. So let's look down here in the lower right. Do you see this really small icon here, this little cloud? This is Windows OneDrive. Now, OneDrive by default is set as auto execute on user login. And we're actually gonna look at the specific configuration change that Windows does to make sure OneDrive starts. Because think about it, you have malware on a system. If you can make a similar change to start your malware as OneDrive, it should launch on user login. So let's look. Basically, OneDrive uses the Windows registry run key, and we've already covered those keys. I think we've even seen OneDrive, but I do want to point that out real quick, just so we have a better understanding of how persistence works. So let's open up our reg query here. We'll go reg query, HKCU, software, Microsoft, Windows, current version, run. And as you can see here, we have one item, OneDrive. Now remember, by default, Windows is gonna go to this specific key on every user login and execute any programs contained within. So that means some defensive tool sets are watching any modifications to this key, but in this specific scenario, OneDrive is there, right? If you add another key, let's say you called the key OneDrive Updater and you pointed it at your binary, your malicious remote access tool, that would be pretty tricky to find. And not only would that be tricky to find, but on every user login, it's gonna execute both OneDrive and your malware executable. And that's persistence, right? That is persistence right there. You're making a configuration change that's gonna execute your malware when the user logs on to the system. So one of the first things I tell operators, if you get your phishing campaign executed right, you want to get persistence on that machine. You wanna make some configuration change. Now, there are so many different persistence techniques out there, and they're mainly divided into two categories. You have administrative, or what I like to call system persistence, and then you have basic user persistence. Now, the big difference is, I'll say, kind of twofold, right? One, you have to have the correct privilege. If you're a basic user, there's no way you're gonna be able to make a big configuration change to get some type of system persistence. You're gonna have to try to escalate, you're gonna have to try to get admin first. However, again, we want to make sure we have a session on this machine if it reboots, right? So we need to have some form of persistence. That's why we turn to these user persistence methods. And we're going to go through four different tools in the RTFM to do some type of user persistence. And then we're actually going to cover some system persistence later on in videos after we privilege escalate on this machine. That's persistence. I covered what it is, why it's important, and then the big difference between user and system persistence. Now the fun begins. The next 4 videos, we're gonna be walking through 4 different techniques that get us persistence on this machine. So should be awesome. Click through the next one. We'll see you there.